London, 1850. The rain lashed against the windows of Fairhaven Manor as Vincent Forsythe, the Duke of Thornfield, stared into the dying embers of the fire. At 34, the widowed Duke had not expected to find himself alone again, much less burdened with the weight of his ancestral home crumbling around him. "My lord," said Simmons, his aging butler, appearing at the study door. "The solicitor's letter has arrived." Vincent took the envelope without a word, breaking the seal with resignation. His father's gambling debts, discovered only after his passing 6 months prior, had brought the once prosperous dukedom to its knees. "Shall I bring more brandy, your grace?" Simmons asked, eyeing the empty decanter. "No," Vincent replied, his voice hollow as he scanned the contents of the letter. "That will be all." When the door closed, Vincent crushed the paper in his fist. Unless he could raise £20,000 within 3 months, everything, the estate, the London townhouse, generations of heritage, would be lost. There was only one solution society deemed appropriate for a man of his station: he must marry wealth, and quickly. The thought made his stomach turn. His first marriage, arranged by his father to the daughter of a marquis, had been one of mutual respect but little passion. Caroline had died 2 years ago in childbirth, taking their stillborn son with her. Vincent had mourned them both and vowed never to subject another woman to such a cold arrangement. But desperation changed even the most principled of men. Katherine Grantley adjusted her spectacles as she reviewed the household accounts by candlelight in the small sitting room of her brother's modest London townhouse. At 27, with no fortune and unremarkable looks according to society's harsh standards, she had resigned herself to spinsterhood after her single season had yielded no prospects. "Still awake, Kate?" her brother James asked, appearing at the doorway in his dressing gown. "These accounts won't balance themselves," she replied with a small smile. "Lady Pembroke has requested I take on additional duties with the children's music education." James frowned. "You already serve as governess to 3 families. This can't continue." Katherine sighed. "What choice do we have? Your position at the university barely covers our expenses, and with mother's medical needs. You were meant for better things than teaching other people's children," James said softly. "You play the pianoforte better than any performer I've heard in London's concert halls. A skill that earns respect but not proposals, as we discovered years ago," Katherine replied, keeping her tone light despite the old sting. "Now go to bed, brother. I'll be up shortly." After James departed, Katherine closed the ledger and moved to the pianoforte tucked into the corner of the room. It was well past midnight, but playing was her only true solace. Her fingers found the keys as they always did, without need for sheet music or lamplight. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the small room, her emotions pouring into each note: longing, resignation, and a quiet defiance against the constraints of her circumstances. She didn't hear the carriage stop outside, nor the surprised pause of its occupant as the music drifted through the partially open window. "I've compiled a list of suitable heiresses," Lord Edward Halsey said, sliding a paper across the breakfast table to Vincent. "The season begins next week. If you make your intentions clear quickly, you could be wed by summer." Vincent glanced at the names without interest. "I know some of these families. They'll want lengthy courtships, settlements, negotiations." "Time you don't have," Edward finished bluntly. "Perhaps a wealthy widow would be more expedient." "Lady Wentworth is 53 and has buried 3 husbands," Vincent interrupted. "I may be desperate, but I've not abandoned all sense." Edward sighed. "What of the American heiresses?" "They're eager for titles, less concerned with traditional courtships." "And more likely to expect affection," Vincent replied. "I won't deceive some innocent girl with false promises of love. Then you'll lose Fairhaven." Edward's words hung in the air between them. Vincent pushed away from the table. "I need air. I'll walk back to my townhouse." The evening was crisp as Vincent strode through the fashionable streets of Mayfair. His mind churned with impossible choices until an unexpected sound stopped him mid-step. Piano music, hauntingly beautiful and played with extraordinary emotion, floated from a modest townhouse on the corner. Vincent stood transfixed as the melody washed over him, stirring something he'd thought long buried. On impulse, he noted the address before continuing homeward, the music lingering in his mind like a half-remembered dream. A position as music teacher at Fairhaven Manor. Katherine repeated, staring at the letter in disbelief. For the Duke of Thornfield's ward. It seems your reputation has finally reached the right ears, James said, beaming. The salary is generous too, 3 times what you earn from all your current families combined. Katherine frowned. But to live in Kent, away from you and Mother. Mother's health has improved, and I'm perfectly capable of managing our household, James insisted. This is the opportunity you deserve. 3 days later, Katherine arrived at Fairhaven Manor, a magnificent if somewhat neglected country estate nestled among rolling hills. She was shown to a comfortable chamber by the housekeeper, Mrs. Bedford, who explained that the Duke's 12-year-old ward, Miss Sophia Winters, had been living with them for just 6 months following her parents' deaths abroad. His Grace is in London until tomorrow, Mrs. Bedford explained. Miss Sophia is a willful child, I'm afraid. We've had 2 governesses leave already. Katherine raised an eyebrow. And what happened to her music teacher? There wasn't one, miss. The Duke decided music might settle her spirits, being something she enjoyed with her mother. That evening, after an introductory meeting with Sophia, a sharp-eyed, auburn-haired girl who regarded Katherine with open suspicion, Katherine explored the manor. She discovered a magnificent music room housing a Broadwood grand piano that clearly hadn't been played in years. Unable to resist, she sat down well after the household had retired and began to play. The instrument's tone was rich despite its neglect, and soon she lost herself in Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, her fingers caressing the keys as the moonlight streamed through the tall windows. So absorbed was she that Katherine failed to notice the tall figure standing in the doorway until he spoke. You play as though the composer himself guided your hands. Katherine jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. Your Grace! I apologize for the intrusion. I didn't expect you're Miss Grantley, he said, stepping into the moonlit room. The new music teacher. Vincent Forsythe was taller than Katherine had imagined, with sharp aristocratic features softened somewhat by intelligent grey eyes. He wore his riding clothes despite the late hour, as if he'd come directly from London without stopping to change. Yes, Your Grace, she replied with a small curtsy. I arrived this afternoon. Vincent moved closer, studying her with a curious intensity that made her pulse quicken. That piece, I heard it once before, outside a townhouse in London. It was you, wasn't it? Katherine blinked in surprise. You heard me play in London. 3 nights ago. I was walking past and stopped, quite unable to move until the music ended. A fleeting smile touched his lips. It seems fate has a curious sense of timing, Miss Grantley. Before Katherine could respond, he turned toward the door. Forgive the interruption. Please continue if you wish, this room has been silent too long. He was gone before she could form a reply, leaving Katherine to wonder at the strange encounter and why the Duke's penetrating gaze had left her so unsettled. Over the following weeks, Katherine found herself increasingly drawn into the complicated dynamics of Fairhaven Manor. Sophia proved to be brilliant but wounded, her grief manifesting as rebellion against authority. Yet music provided a bridge, and Katherine soon discovered the girl had inherited her mother's talent for the piano. Why does Uncle Vincent never play? Sophia asked one afternoon as they practiced a simple Mozart piece. Mother said he was once quite accomplished. Katherine's surprise must have shown, for Sophia continued with a child's blunt honesty, he hasn't touched the piano since Aunt Caroline died. Mother said music reminds him of her. This revelation gave Katherine pause. She had seen little of the Duke since their midnight encounter, though she occasionally felt his presence when she played in the evenings, as if he were listening from the shadows of the hallway. Their paths crossed properly again during a violent spring storm that rattled the windows of Fairhaven. Katherine found Vincent in the library, sorting through papers with a troubled expression. Excuse me, Your Grace. Mrs. Bedford suggested I might find additional music sheets here. Vincent looked up, seeming almost relieved by the interruption. Miss Grantley. Please, come in. He gestured toward a cabinet near the window. My late wife organized the music collection. I believe you'll find what you need there. As Katherine browsed the sheets, thunder crashed overhead, causing her to flinch slightly. Not fond of storms? Vincent asked, his tone gentler than she'd heard before. They remind me of my father's passing, she admitted, surprising herself with the confession. He was caught in a tempest at sea. Vincent's expression softened with understanding. My condolences. Loss leaves marks that weather can sometimes reopen. As music does for you. The words slipped out before she could reconsider their impropriety. Instead of the rebuke she expected, Vincent sighed. Sophia has been sharing family histories, I see. Children often speak truths adults prefer to keep buried, Katherine replied, then added hastily, I apologize if I've overstepped. Vincent stood and moved to the window, watching rain lash against the glass. Caroline played. Not with your skill, but with dedication. She favored Mozart above all others. A pause. The night she went into labor, she had been playing. Sometimes I wonder if the exertion. You cannot blame music for tragedy, Your Grace, Katherine said softly. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. What I blame, Miss Grantley, is far more complicated than that. His eyes held hers for a moment too long before he abruptly changed the subject. How is Sophia progressing? She has natural talent and a good ear. With consistent practice, she could become quite accomplished. Vincent nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then I made the right decision in bringing you here. Katherine couldn't help but ask, was it truly coincidence, Your Grace? Finding me through my playing that night. A rare smile crossed his features. Perhaps not entirely. After hearing you play, I made inquiries. When I learned you were a governess with exceptional musical talent, it seemed providential. The implication that he had sought her out specifically sent a flutter through Katherine's chest that she dared not examine too closely. As spring blossomed into summer, Katherine found herself increasingly drawn to the enigmatic Duke. Their encounters, though infrequent, grew less formal. Sometimes he would appear in the music room doorway as she played in the evenings, listening silently before offering a brief comment or question about the composition. What Katherine didn't know was that Vincent's financial situation had grown dire. His solicitor's letters became more urgent, and secret meetings with potential creditors in London yielded no solutions. The whispers had begun in society circles, the Duke of Thornfield was on the verge of ruin. One evening, Katherine overheard a heated conversation between Vincent and Lord Edward Halsey in the library. You've run out of time, Edward was saying. Lady Harrington's ball is tomorrow night. Her daughter Cecilia has a dowry that would save Fairhaven twice over. And no interest in country life or becoming a mother to Sophia, Vincent replied wearily. You know I cannot entertain such a match. Then consider Miss Porter, the American shipping heiress. New money, yes, but plenty of it. Katherine stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. So the rumors that had reached even the servants' hall were true, the Duke was in financial distress severe enough to necessitate a marriage of convenience. The knowledge shouldn't have affected her so deeply, yet she found herself returning to her chamber with an inexplicable heaviness in her chest. The following evening, as Vincent prepared to depart for London, Katherine encountered him in the entrance hall. Will you be gone long, Your Grace? She asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. A few days. Society obligations. His expression was closed, the warmth she'd glimpsed in recent interactions carefully shuttered. On impulse, Katherine said, Sophia has prepared a piece to play for you upon your return. She's quite nervous about your approval. Something softened in his eyes. Then I shall look forward to it. He hesitated, then added quietly, and perhaps you might play something as well, Miss Grantley. Your music has become something of a balm. Before she could respond, he bowed slightly and departed, leaving Katherine to wonder if she had imagined the conflicted look in his eyes. The London ball was everything Vincent despised about society: shallow conversations, matchmaking mamas, and the constant pressure of appearances. He dutifully danced with Miss Porter, finding her pleasant enough but utterly without spark, then with Lady Cecilia Harrington, whose clear disdain for anything outside of London made him inwardly cringe. "I understand your ward is quite the handful," Lady Cecilia remarked as they moved through a quadrille. "Children are so tiresome, don't you agree? If I were to marry, I would insist on sending any stepchildren to boarding school immediately." Vincent merely offered a noncommittal response, though his decision was made. No amount of money was worth subjecting Sophia to such callous disregard. Later, as he stood by the punch table, Lord Edward approached with a troubled expression. "You've heard the rumours, I assume?" Edward asked without preamble. "Which particular gossip has caught your attention tonight?" "It concerns your music teacher," Edward said quietly. "Miss Grantley, is it? There are whispers that you brought her to Fairhaven for reasons beyond teaching your ward." Vincent stiffened. "What nonsense is this? Lady Whitmore's nephew was at your townhouse the night you apparently heard Miss Grantley playing. He claims you stood transfixed outside her window for nearly half an hour before making inquiries about her the very next day." "Miss Grantley is a respectable governess with exceptional talent," Vincent said coldly. Edward held up a placating hand. "I'm merely warning you that tongues are wagging. A bachelor duke hiring a relatively young, unmarried woman of little means, well, you know how society delights in scandal." The conversation left Vincent seething. That something as innocent as appreciating exceptional music could be twisted into salacious gossip was precisely why he despised London's elite circles. More concerning was how such rumours might affect Catherine's reputation if they spread. 3 days later, Vincent returned to Fairhaven with a decision made. He would not marry for money. Instead, he would sell his London properties and some of his most valuable art collection. It wouldn't save everything, but it might preserve the manor itself for Sophia's future. What he hadn't expected was to find Katherine in the music room late that night, playing a mournful Chopin piece with such emotion that he stopped in the doorway, unwilling to interrupt the raw beauty of her performance. When she finally finished, he spoke softly. "You play as if each note carries a piece of your soul." Katherine turned, startled. "Your Grace, I didn't hear you return. Forgive me for disturbing you." He stepped into the room. "That piece, it speaks of longing. Or perhaps farewell." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "I received a letter from my brother today. Our mother's health has worsened. I may need to request a leave of absence." "Of course," Vincent said immediately. "Family must come first." Katherine hesitated, then asked, "Was your trip to London successful?" Something in her tone suggested she knew more than she revealed. Vincent moved to the window, considering how much to share. "I made certain decisions that society will likely deem foolish, but that I can live with in good conscience." "Regarding your financial situation," she ventured carefully. He turned to her, surprised. "The servants' gossip reaches the music room, I see. I overheard your conversation with Lord Halsey before you left," she admitted. "I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping." Vincent sighed. "Then you know I was expected to secure a wealthy bride. Yet you've returned alone. I discovered I couldn't bring myself to marry without—" He paused, searching for the right word, "without harmony." Katherine's eyes widened slightly at his choice of metaphor. "Even at the cost of your estate." "Some prices are too high, regardless of what is gained," he replied, his gaze holding hers with unexpected intensity. "I've lived one marriage of convenience, Miss Grantley. It was not without respect or regard, but something essential was missing. Like a perfect composition played without passion, technically correct but ultimately hollow." The silence between them hummed with unspoken possibilities until Katherine broke it, rising from the piano bench. "I should retire. Sophia's recital is tomorrow, and she'll need encouragement." Vincent nodded. "Until tomorrow, then." As Katherine reached the doorway, he added, "You're playing tonight. It was the most beautiful thing I've heard since the night I first heard you in London." She paused, not turning back. Music speaks truths we sometimes cannot voice ourselves, Your Grace. After she departed, Vincent approached the piano, trailing his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. For the first time in years, he felt the urge to play again. The following afternoon, Sophia performed her piece with nervous determination, a simple but well-executed Mozart sonata that brought genuine pleasure to Vincent's expression. Magnificent, he declared when she finished, causing the girl to beam with pride. Your mother would have been tremendously proud. Katherine watched their interaction with a warm sense of accomplishment. Sophia had blossomed under her tutelage, but more significantly, the relationship between uncle and ward had strengthened noticeably over the past months. Now it's Miss Grantley's turn, Sophia announced, jumping up from the bench. Katherine shook her head. This was your recital, Sophia. Please, Miss Grantley, the girl insisted. Uncle Vincent needs to hear you play properly, not just when you think no one is listening. Before Katherine could protest further, Vincent said quietly, I would consider it a privilege. Unable to refuse, Katherine took her place at the piano. After a moment's consideration, she began to play Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, her fingers moving with practiced precision through the complex emotional landscape of the piece. She lost herself in the music, forgetting her audience until the final notes faded. When she looked up, Vincent was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch, admiration mingled with something deeper, more personal than she dared interpret. That was beyond words, he said softly. Sophia, less constrained by adult propriety, clapped enthusiastically. Will you play something together? Mother said Uncle Vincent used to play duets. An uncomfortable silence fell until Katherine said gently, perhaps another time, Sophia. Your uncle may not, no, Vincent interrupted, surprising them both. Sophia is right. It's time. He moved to the piano, hesitating only briefly before sitting beside Katherine on the bench. Katherine felt the warmth of him next to her, his shoulder nearly touching hers as he positioned his hands over the keys. What shall we play? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Do you know Mozart's Sonata in D for four hands? She nodded, and after a tentative beginning, their playing gradually synchronized, building in confidence and expression. Vincent's technique was rusty but fundamentally sound, and by the final movement, they moved together as if they had been playing duets for years. When they finished, Sophia applauded wildly. That was wonderful. You must play together more often. Vincent turned to Katherine, still seated beside him on the bench. Indeed, we must, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. That evening, Katherine wrote to her brother, explaining that while she was concerned for their mother, her position at Fairhaven had become more than employment, it had become a purpose she was reluctant to abandon. What she didn't write was how her feelings for the Duke had grown into something impossible to ignore, something that both thrilled and terrified her. 2 weeks later, the London gossip that Edward had warned about reached Fairhaven in the form of a particularly vicious letter from Vincent's aunt, the Dowager Countess of Merewether. Your relationship with your ward's music teacher has become the subject of unseemly speculation, Vincent read aloud to Katherine, whom he had summoned to the library. If you insist on maintaining such impropriety under your roof, I shall be forced to reconsider Sophia's place in my will. Katherine felt the blood drain from her face. Your Grace, I know, he interrupted, his expression grim. My aunt delights in wielding her financial influence like a weapon. She did the same with my father and later with me during my first marriage. Perhaps I should resign, Katherine said quietly. I would not want to be the cause of Sophia losing her inheritance. Vincent's jaw tightened. That is precisely what my aunt expects. She has selected another suitable bride for me, her goddaughter, Lady Priscilla Mortimer, and believes removing you will smooth that path. Katherine tried to ignore the painful twist in her chest at the mention of another potential bride. Then it seems the simplest solution, for Sophia's sake. The simplest, yes. But not the right one. Vincent moved closer, his expression softening. Katherine, Miss Grantley, these past months have brought something back to Fairhaven that I thought was lost forever. Not just music, but life itself. The use of her given name sent a tremor through her. "Your Grace, Vincent," he corrected gently. "When we are alone, at least." "What you're suggesting," she began hesitantly, "is that I will not allow malicious gossip or my aunt's manipulations to deprive Sophia, or myself, of your presence," he finished. "However, we must address the situation directly." Before Katherine could respond, Mrs. Bedford appeared at the door. "Excuse me, Your Grace, but Miss Sophia has taken ill. Dr. Merriman has been sent for, but she's asking for Miss Grantley." The conversation suspended, Katherine hurried to Sophia's bedchamber, finding the girl feverish and frightened. She remained at her bedside through the night, cooling her brow and offering comfort until the doctor diagnosed a severe influenza and prescribed rest and careful monitoring. For 3 days, Katherine barely left Sophia's side, her own exhaustion secondary to the girl's needs. Vincent appeared frequently, his concern evident in the tight lines around his eyes and the gentle way he spoke to his ward. On the 4th night, when Sophia's fever finally broke, Katherine nearly collapsed from fatigue. Vincent insisted she rest, personally escorting her to her chamber. "You've been extraordinary," he said, pausing outside her door. "I don't know how to thank you." "There's no need," Katherine replied wearily. "I've grown quite fond of her." Vincent's hand moved as if to touch her face, then dropped back to his side. "Get some rest. We'll speak tomorrow." But tomorrow brought unexpected complications. James arrived at Fairhaven with urgent news. Their mother had suffered a stroke and was asking for Katherine. Within hours, Katherine found herself in a carriage bound for London, her hasty departure leaving no time for proper farewells with either Sophia or Vincent. A month passed with only brief correspondence between Katherine and Fairhaven. Her mother's condition stabilized but required constant care, forcing Katherine to request an extended leave. Vincent's replies were formal but contained subtle warmth, along with reports of Sophia's recovery and questions about Katherine's return. What he didn't mention was that the financial crisis had come to a head. Without a wealthy marriage or Katherine's calming influence through music, Vincent had grown increasingly frustrated with his limited options. In desperation, he had begun selling family heirlooms, causing a new wave of society gossip. One evening, as Katherine sat playing softly on the modest piano in her brother's home, a knock came at the door. James answered it and returned with a puzzled expression. "It's the Duke of Thornfield," he said quietly. "He's asking to speak with you." Katherine's heart leapt as she rose to greet Vincent, who stood in the doorway looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Your Grace," she said, cursing. "This is unexpected." "Forgive the intrusion," he replied, his eyes drinking in the sight of her. "I had business in London and wished to inquire after your mother's health personally." After brief introductions to James, who excused himself with surprising alacrity, they were left alone in the small sitting room. "Your mother is improving?" Vincent asked. "Yes, though slowly. The doctors are more hopeful now." An awkward silence fell until Vincent said, "Fairhaven has been uncommonly quiet in your absence. Sophia asks for you daily." "I've missed her," Katherine replied honestly. "And Fairhaven?" "Just Fairhaven," he asked, a hint of vulnerability in his question. Katherine met his gaze steadily. "No, not just Fairhaven." Vincent moved closer. "I've made decisions in your absence. Difficult ones." He hesitated. "I've sold the London townhouse and much of the art collection. It's enough to satisfy the most pressing creditors, but not enough to save everything." "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly. "Don't be. For the first time in my life, I'm making choices based on what truly matters, not what society dictates." His eyes held hers. "Your music helped me see that." "My music?" It spoke of passion, of living fully even within constraints. "It reminded me what it means to feel." Vincent took her hand, an intimacy that would have been shocking months earlier but now seemed inevitable. "Katherine, I didn't come here merely to inquire after your mother." Her pulse quickened. "Why did you come?" "To ask if you would consider becoming the Duchess of Thornfield." Katherine stared at him in disbelief. "Vincent, you know I have no fortune." "If this is about saving Fairhaven, this is about saving me," he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "About waking each morning to your music, about building something true instead of convenient. I love you, Katherine. I think I began falling the moment I heard you playing in the moonlight." Tears filled her eyes. "Society will say you've lost your mind, a duke marrying a governess." "Society can go hang," Vincent replied with surprising vehemence. "I've lived by its rules my entire life and found only hollow satisfaction. With you, I found harmony." He knelt before her, still holding her hand. "I cannot offer you the wealth or position that should accompany my title. Parts of Fairhaven may be lost. But what remains will be built on something genuine." Katherine touched his face gently. "I fell in love with the man who stood in doorways listening to midnight sonatas, not with his title or his estate. Is that a yes?" "Yes," she whispered, and as he rose to kiss her, Katherine knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their lives entwined like the melodies and harmonies of the duets they would play for years to come. 6 months later, the gossip columns of London were ablaze with the news that the Duke of Thornfield had married his ward's music teacher in a quiet ceremony at Fairhaven's chapel. Society matrons declared it a scandalous mesalliance, while younger ladies sighed over the romance of it all. What none of the gossips knew was that on their wedding night, as moonlight streamed through the windows of the music room, the Duke and Duchess played a duet of their own composition, a piece that spoke of loss and discovery, of endings and beginnings, and of the transformative power of love expressed through music. And though Fairhaven was somewhat diminished in grandeur, with the east wing closed and some of the tenant farms sold, it had gained something far more valuable, a household filled with music and genuine affection, where a once wounded duke, his spirited ward, and the governess who had changed everything with midnight sonatas created a harmony that wealth alone could never purchase.